Well, welcome everybody. I guess we'll get started. It's 2:04 on my watch, so you guys having a good weekend so far? Yeah, we are too. Wish it was maybe a little more sunny, but I'll take the beach any way I can get it. I'm going to have a little word of prayer and then we'll get started, okay? Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this time that we can have to come together to learn how we can spread your gospel in all that we do, not just through our church ministries, but in our everyday lives, both to our children and all those around us. I pray that you give me the right words to say, and I pray that everyone's blessed this weekend. In your name, amen. Well, my name is Anders Petersen. I am a family practice physician in Cleveland, Tennessee, so that's just a little northeast of Chattanooga. My wife is on the ticket too. She's an RN and put me through medical school out in Loma, worked that whole time, and once we got to Chattanooga where I did my residency, we had Noelle by that time, and then we said, you know what, we're just going to figure this out. You go to work now. And so I went to work, and she has been doing an amazing job with our kids ever since then. But this is Chastity over here. And what we're going to talk about today is, the title is Sharing Our Faith Without Apology. I've been thinking about that statement, that we had to construct that statement probably 4 months ago, and that was when I just kind of had an outline in my head. But I was thinking about it, and I've also been reading a book by our pastor, our current pastor. His name's Chris Eckenroth, and he's trying really hard to get us all to see what it would be like if our church was a part of like the Church of Acts. And I think about what that would mean in my daily life. I mean, one of the followers of Jesus, one of the writers of a gospel, was a physician. He spread the gospel to a lot of the world, and I thought to myself, would these guys apologize about their belief in Jesus? I don't think they would. And I was thinking about that in my own practice, and how can I implement that in my practice, and Chastity and the ministries that she's involved with that we'll get into a little later. This is two of our twins. They don't really apologize about anything. They're kind of a whirlwind, a force of nature, and they have been since they were right out of the womb. But they're wonderful. That's right before we went hiking down. I can't say it right. The Waiupu Valley and the Big Island in Hawaii. So, some objectives. I'm just going to discuss some practical ways that I've implemented and Chas has implemented in our daily life and in my practice, how I spread the gospel to my patients. Also, I feel like in our current society, there's a lot of things you can't say anymore. And I'm not going to get into that in the specifics, but I found in my practice that my patients really respond well if I'm honest with them and truthful, and I don't try to hide things or sugarcoat things. They just want to know what I need to tell them and what they need to know. But I feel like that works especially well with the gospel, with the truth from the Bible as well. And then the last objective is the long game. I've been practicing for 10 years at my current practice, and I've really gotten to know my community and the people that I care for very well. And I was thinking the other day when I had a 95-year-old and their 72-year-old daughter, and then another granddaughter all in my office kind of within the same couple of days. And I've gotten to know these families and kind of become a part of their lives. And it's a blessing. It's an honor to be able to care for them, and not just for their physical health, but also their spiritual health. These people are always asking me all sorts of questions about my own faith. And being in practice in the town I'm in, they kind of challenged me. They challenged me early on and still do, to be able to tell them what I believe and why. They want to know. They're curious about it. So why does this matter? Why do we talk about any of this? I was trying to think about why we need to talk about this. Not just to spread the gospel, but I wanted to think about what are objective ways why it's important to share our faith and spread the truth that only we have in the Bible. Well, our community recently in Collegedale was touched by this just recently, and depression and suicide rates in recent years have been on the rise. Suicide was the 12th leading cause of death. This is from 2020. It took me a while down at the bottom. I did find some more recent numbers since 2020, but some interesting numbers that really shocked me was that suicide rose from the year 1999 to about 2018 by, I think, over 30%, like 35%. It's on the bottom there. That is an incredible rate of change in a couple of decades. And then everyone knows what happened in the spring of 2020. Everybody's lives changed. COVID happened. And I had a worry from the beginning of COVID right away about my own patients and just people in the community. What are we going to do about depression in this kind of COVID world we're living in? Because we asked everybody to go home. We asked everybody to stay away from each other. We closed down churches for varying amounts of time. In my community, we weren't closed for too long, but it was still kind of a fight to get back to where everyone's attending again and all the services are back online. But since COVID, we have about a year of numbers. I couldn't find anything on, up past 2021, but it has increased. The suicide rate's increased by 4% just since COVID hit, which is a pretty rapid increase. And I see it, I don't know about any of you or what kind of practices you're all in, but I'm in primary care, and a lot of us primary care docs have become psychiatrists in a lot of our day. I mean, whether we like it or not, we see a lot of mental health. And I think that's a privilege too. We know about their hypertension and their diabetes and how much they exercise, and I think it's appropriate that we also know about their mental health. But I noticed a rapid increase in depression and anxiety since COVID hit. So many of my patients struggled to come in. They were nervous to come into the office because they didn't want to get sick. So we tried to implement a lot of telehealth services, and that was very hit or miss. But since I've now gotten most of my patients back into the office and we're functioning at a normal rate, and everyone's coming into the office again, they all have told me that it was pretty bad being at home, not being able to talk to anybody, not being able to go to church, not really being a part of their community anymore. And that really struck me, that I think it's something that we all need to think about going forward. If there's new pandemics and new things in the future, which I think there will be, we need to sort of get our patients prepared and figure out a way we can still be a community and be both a church community and a a community where we work to keep that from happening. But I have found some interesting studies over the years. I wanted to try and find some real, I don't know what just happened. There we go. Some actual data on if there's a link between, spiritualism, prayer, attending church, and people's mental health. And I did find some things. This was in 2012. They did a review of kind of all the current study data that was out there on religion and spirituality. And they use a broad term here. The RS is just religion, spirituality of any kind. And what they found was they did try to correct for some factors, because there's genetic factors, there's environmental factors that we're not always in control of that may contribute to depression. But overall, everything else being equal, being a part of a religious group or spiritual group involvement related to less depression, especially in the context of stress and anxiety. Moving on from there, I found this really interesting study. They followed people out almost 30 years and found out that church attendance, just going to church, provided not only a mental health benefit that helped with depression, but they also saw lower smoking rates, people exercised more, they had more social contact with each other, and they stayed married longer, which is another sort of problem in our current society. So I just wanted to touch on those couple of issues because they're big issues in my own practice. I probably see at least 3 to 5 people in a day. Almost one a day is a new depression, anxiety. They're coming to me because they want to know, what do I do next? What can I do to combat this depression, combat this anxiety? And then I have probably 3 or 4 more in a day that are already dealing with that or have dealt with that for years. And so I am an evidence-based doctor. I use all the tools at my disposal. But you get someone who's 25 in your office and they're depressed or they're anxious and they might need help depending on how severe that is. And a lot of them are saying, well, I know I'm struggling with this, but I don't want to take medication. I don't want to go on anything. And so I try to work with them if that's the safe and the right thing to do. And so I thought to myself, well, what am I telling these people? Am I, just telling them just to go exercise, which we know improves depression and anxiety rates? Am I telling them to eat right? What can I do more than that? And in my own life, I know I've always turned to prayer. I've always turned to, books like this one, like Steps to Christ and Desire of Ages. And not just because it's helped me, but because I know it could help others, I thought, well, am I implementing this in my own practice? Am I doing this? And so we're going to look at some practical ways that we can share with patients and just with our community. So this is some quotes from Ellen White. Make the truth clear and plain. Our publications have a most sacred work to do in making clear, simple, and plain the spiritual basis of our faith. Everywhere the people are taking sides. All are arranging themselves either under the banner of truth and righteousness or under the banner of apostate powers that are contending for the supremacy. At this time, God's message to the world is to be given with such prominence and power that the people will be brought face to face, mind to mind, heart to heart with the truth. They must be brought to see its superiority over the multitudinous errors that are pushing their way into notice, to supplant, if possible, the Word of God for this solemn time. It's always amazing to me, I don't know about anyone else in the room, that this stuff was written a long time ago. It always blows me away that she wrote this stuff in 1900, 1890, whatever the date may be, and it rings so true today when I read it. And I think that's another reason why the literature that we have at our disposal, especially as Adventists, is so vital. People will be looking at this book when I walk in the room, and so we'll just kind of back up to that. About a year ago, I heard a great sermon. It was by Conrad Vine. My wife was there too, and I got to give my wife credit because she asked me if I was giving these out in my office, and I've got to be honest, at the time, I was not. And I was in someone else's office getting some dental work done, and I said, he's got so many books just sitting everywhere, and he's got this nice peaceful music playing, and he had, Steps to Christ and a bunch of other tracks that you could pick up. And I said, man, why aren't I doing that? And so I thought to myself and kind of gave myself the excuses, the normal ones. I work for a hospital-owned practice with about 8 or 10 other providers, but, in my contract it says I can practice medicine how I trained and how how I deem fit, and I do live in the Bible Belt of the U.S., so I didn't think it'd be a big problem, so I said, well, I do need some of those books. And so Chas bought me a couple of cases of books, some Steps to Christ, there's another one, yeah, this is the one, these are two really, these I cannot keep in my patient rooms. These two books, The Great Controversy, and then The Great Hope is some excerpts from The Great Controversy, but I don't know what it is, maybe about the cover with the angels flying down, but man, people, yeah.
You mean you can't keep them because they keep getting taken?
Yeah, I'm getting there, yeah. I didn't throw them away. So I put stacks of these in my patient rooms. I have 3 patient rooms, and I just rotate all day. And so I have stacks of Great Hope, some Steps to Christ, these little small ones. But man, that Great Hope book, it starts off, the first chapter is, I think the Why is Sin Permitted chapter. And it's interesting to me. I talk to a lot of non-Adventists. I talk to a lot of people of other faiths. And it's like they've never heard or read anything like that. It kind of blows them away. And every day almost, I will walk into one room at least, and someone's reading, that Great Hope or a Steps to Christ, and they say, man, can I keep this? Doc, can I keep this? I said, yeah. She's like, I really want to give this to my son or my daughter. And I said, well, okay, I have 2 more if you want, some more. And so ever since Chas bought me those cases of books, she keeps buying me more because I can't keep them in my office. People keep taking them. And I thought to myself, and back to this sermon that I heard, I think I used to think foolishly that my job was not just to hand out the literature, but I think explain the literature. Or I think sometimes we almost, we almost apologize for the literature and have some kind of statement or disclaimer to our own literature. And the sermon I heard was so powerful because it was just about getting it in the person's hand. And that may be, all you have to ever do is just put it in their hands and not even say a word other than just, read it, see what you think. And that kind of became my mantra for when I first started handing these out. Yeah, question?
By the way, did y'all come across Myers
Yeah, that's awesome. Can everybody hear that?
Say it again.
So, did you say Myers Media? Okay, or Desire of Ages Project. It's an audio version of the books. You said it's dramatized? Okay, yeah, I've come across a couple of those over the years that have been really great. I'll listen to them in the car, and we'll listen to them with the kids when we're on a long trip. But that brings up another point, that it's something our pastor did this last year, which was really an awesome ministry. His goal to all of us, which kind of also inspired me handing out more books, was to hand out how many steps to Christ for the year? 5,000 of these from our church community by Christmas of this year, or by the end of the year. But what he did was really great. He took each chapter of Steps to Christ and preached a sermon on each chapter, and then he put it on a podcast, and then all the ones we hand out, I don't have the right one. I actually borrowed this from my daughter, so this isn't the right one. But he put his little ministry website sticker on the inside cover of every one of them. And so then when you hand them out, they've got the sticker in there that you can say, hey, if you're interested in this podcast, it just leads them right to it, and they can listen to it and read it along. Gives it just a little extra energy to it. But I have just really been humbled by how important it is to just get the truth out there, to get these books out there. They'll do their own work. I'll tell you a quick story. I had a patient I had some books in my office that I would give away. Before I started just leaving them in my patient rooms, I had some books to give away, but they were in my own office, and so I'd have to if they seemed interested, I'd give them a book. And eventually I just got to the point where I'm just stacking them in there. But I had a lady that was in my office that was really questioning her own denomination. She'd been going to a church in the community for a while, and she came to me with a question. She said, I know you go to church and you're a Seventh-day Adventist, and I just want to run something by you. It was a completely non-medical question about something that was going on in her church. It did sound a little suspect. The pastor was preaching on a lot of subjects and about a lot of things, and telling everyone in the congregation, don't tell anyone about what you hear here. And she said it didn't sit with her. She just could not get over. She's like, something is just not right about that. And it bugged her to the point where she's in my office and she asked me, well, what do you think about that? I said, well, that's really not the truth then. I mean, if we have to be ashamed of the gospel, of the truth, we are not doing, something's not right. It stands alone and doesn't need any help, doesn't need any disclaimers. So I gave her a Desire of Ages. And she came back to me maybe 6 months later, and she had left that church she was going to. She hasn't become an Adventist or anything, but she did tell me that she read through the entire Desire of Ages, and it said it completely changed her life. She said, I've never really seen Jesus in that way, in that context, and she got to the point where what was going on at her own local congregation was somehow not right, but I was so blessed by that moment. I mean, all I did was I just gave her the book. That's pretty much it. And I've always loved this verse out of Hebrews. For the word of God is living and powerful, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the division of soul and spirit, of joints and marrow, a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart. It doesn't need any help. So I also came across, this happens in my practice all the time, where I'll be listening to a patient talking about, how much they exercise or what they eat. And I'm often thinking about, well, the steps to Christ and the great controversy are amazing, but we also have a lot of other knowledge, I think, that other folks don't have, and we've had it for a long, long time. Just our health message, I think, shouldn't be overlooked. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I like this quote. I think this is out of Call Porter Ministry. Our health literature is the helping hand of the gospel, opening the way for the truth to enter and save many souls. I know of nothing which so quickly unlocks hearts as this literature, which when read and practiced leads souls to the searching of the Bible for a better understanding of the truth. So I wanted to mention a couple things that come across my desk every day. Does anybody work in primary care here? Yes, okay. So you've probably dealt with this too. I mean, we all are dealing with the effects of obesity. But do you ever come across people that they'll say, well, I just don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm exercising and I'm eating right. I watch what I eat. And I sometimes, I don't mean to be like mean here, but I think they just watch what they eat, but they don't think about what they're eating. They're just, they look at it, but I don't think they see the damage that it's doing. And I'll ask them, well, how much do you exercise? And they're like, oh, every day. I'm like, oh, well, let's unpack that a little bit. What does that mean? And they're like, well, I get up and I walk out to my mailbox and back, and I do some weed eating and some mowing. And I'm like, well, that's all good. But let's think about how much we're getting kind of a moderate level of exercise every week. And they're like, well, what does that mean? And I have to kind of explain it to them. And it's just amazing how much we have known for over 100 years. That sometimes people will be in my office and it's like brand new information to them. Like they've never heard, that you shouldn't eat certain things or you should exercise this much, or what does that even mean to exercise? And then just another recent one was, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not, well, like they were asking me what a carbohydrate was. And, well, I don't eat any carbohydrates. And I said, okay. So I left the room. I had to go get something, and I came back in the room, and she was a diabetic, and we've just been having a really hard time controlling her numbers. But she doesn't want to go on any more medicine, and I try really hard to work with people as much as I can to try and drive some of this stuff home. But then I come back in the room, she's like, oh, wait, does KFC count? Like, that's chicken, right? That's not a carb. I was like, well, yeah, but it's deep fried, and there's, you're adding a lot of, extra things we probably shouldn't have in there. She's like, oh. So I left the room again to go get something, and I'll be right back. And so I come back in. She's like, oh, well, when I go to KFC, I also get the mac and cheese and the mashed potatoes every time. I said, well, how often are you doing that? Like, just 4 times a week. It's just, but just the understanding is not always there. And so I do a lot of education in my day. Recently, even someone found out that I was an Adventist, and he wanted everything I could give him on our health practices and our diet. And I don't know if he'd read one of the Blue Zone articles or what, but I could not give him enough information. But I've always loved this. I tell all of our co-op students this fact. I teach a PE class with my wife at our co-op, and we'll get into that in a minute. But I always tell these kids why exercise is so important. This is a study that's pretty recent, that if you do a moderate level of exercise, moderate intensity, you're huffing and puffing, you're sweating, you're not dying. You don't feel like you're going to die anyway. It's the minimum is 150 minutes a week, 2.5 hours a week. It decreased all-cause mortality by almost 20%. That was just a staggering number that I still have a hard time wrapping my head around with all the medicines and all the things we've discovered in healthcare. A 20% decrease in all-cause mortality was pretty staggering. And so that's something I spend a whole lot of my day telling people about that I believe in. So why don't we do this? I was thinking in my own practice. For a long time, it was just, I was scared. I think I was, I don't know, maybe embarrassed or scared to share what I knew and share these books and share the truth sometimes. I don't know if I was afraid of getting in trouble or with who, you know. If God is with us, who can be against us, right? So then I started, you know, when I was putting this together, I said, well, how would the book of Acts, how would our early church handle, you know, this fear? And I think they would preach boldly. I think they would just say their piece. These are just some verses that comfort me. You know, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. And I really like this later in Matthew. When they deliver you up, do not worry about what you should speak, for it will be given to you in that hour what you should speak. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father who speaks in you. And then a similar verse in Luke. I think I was worried a lot for quite a few years about how my own walk would be perceived. I didn't want to be a stumbling block to people. I didn't want to lead them astray or tell them something wrong. I have a problem in my own life of just talking too much and never stopping talking. And it gets me into trouble. It's gotten me into trouble in a lot of ways. But I take great comfort in these verses that when you feel that moment, and I have this now, I try to listen for this moment in my current day where something's telling me, I think this patient needs to hear something, and I have to rely on the Holy Spirit to kind of give me the right way to say it without being offensive, without alienating them in some way. And what I've found, which was kind of surprising, is my patients are way more receptive if I just am blunt with them and just, well, this is what I feel, and this is what I read in the Bible, and have you read this, you know, and I don't, you know, try to spin it in any way. I just say, well, this is how I read that verse, and have you looked at this verse? And it's really those patients that'll ask me questions like that, or that kind of want to know more. They come back and they come back and they come back, and you know, we've formed kind of a high level of trust now. But now also they listen to me about, hey, you probably do need to take this blood pressure medicine, or you know, they don't fight me on the other things because they trust me on the things they know I feel strongly about. Also prayer. I can't say it enough. We need to just bathe everything in prayer. Need to be kind of praying unceasingly. Jesus spent so much of his ministry in prayer. I like this verse, you know, he prayed, continued all night in prayer to God. I don't know the last time I've done that. I don't think I've ever actually done that. I know our pastor has. Our pastor is so awesome right now. He's so on fire. And he gets up at 2:30, I think, every Sabbath morning and has like a prayer, like a conference prayer call with 5 or 6 church members for hours, like every Sabbath. I mean, they are doing amazing things, and we can take a lesson from Jesus about how much we need to spend in our prayer life. Also, you know, in the book of Acts, they spent so much time in prayer, and then amazing, crazy things happen, you know, for the furthering of the gospel. I like this verse. Prayer for the sick is as effective today as in Bible times. The divine healer is present in the sick room. He hears every word of the prayers offered to him in the simplicity of true faith. His disciples today are to pray for the sick, as verily as did the disciples of old. And there will be recoveries, for the prayer of faith shall save the sick. So also, I think early on in my practice, I wasn't praying very much with my patients. I was every once in a while, but not very frequently. And again, same explanation, probably afraid, probably embarrassed. How will this come out? But over, the last few years, I have made it a much bigger part of my practice. And I just kind of listen for a moment when something in my brain will just say, okay, you need to pray with this person. And I think we all need to be listening for that moment. And so before I would kind of excuse my way out of that, or I got to go get something, and now I try really hard to listen to that. And have any of you ever prayed with your patients? I'm sure everybody probably has at some point. Have you ever met a patient that says, no, don't do that? You have? Really? That's amazing. I have yet to meet him. I had a guy a couple weeks ago who started by telling me that, he hated church. His whole family was a part of this denomination, and he wanted nothing to do with it. And I don't know what came over me. I was like, well, would you like me to pray with you? And he said, yeah, I'd really like that. And so, I don't know, I really expected kind of and I know the guy pretty well. I've taken care of him for a few years, and he can be a little, belligerent, and he's just kind of an upset guy, but I'm going to keep trying. And he was receptive to me praying for him. And I haven't ran into that yet. I'm sorry that did happen to somebody, but I'm going to use your granddad as an example. Chas's granddad passed away a few years ago, but he was just this awesome guy and so Christ-like. I was blessed to know him. He was a dentist in the community, and man, he would pray with everybody. Like everybody, every extraction he would do, every just small procedure he would do, he would pray with that patient. He wouldn't ask. Yeah. He would just, this is what we're doing. I'm going to have a prayer, and then we're going to get started. I think he would tell you too, no one ever turned him down. No one ever got upset about it. So, especially in our field, for the most part, I can't say everybody, but most people are very receptive to prayer. And it really, I found it builds a lot of trust with my patients, especially in those vulnerable times that, we only are us and maybe a few people know the things they're telling us, or, some of those things. So I think it's a privilege that we get to do that. So we're going to talk about now just kind of the things that have been keeping us busy lately. And mostly because my wife is amazing, and she never says no to anything. So didn't you have a prayer about that a while ago? Yes. How long was that, 2 years ago?
No, I was 18.
Oh,
yeah,
never
2
mind.
years ago.
Yeah.
No, when I was 18.
It sticks in my brain 2 years ago. I don't know why.
Yeah, maybe we were
maybe
just
around
talking
COVID
about
time.
it.
I don't know. I think we were frustrated because we were at home and church was not happening and nothing was happening, and we were just, what are we supposed to do? So.
Well, I'm an introvert, and I married an extrovert, and all of our children are extrovert, 4 out of 4. So I'm a big believer in you can be more than maybe what your natural personality is or your natural tendencies. God can help you to grow and be more and work for Him, even if it's not comfortable or natural or maybe your comfort zone. And so when I was 18, I was a senior in high school, and I just made a commitment that I would say yes whenever I was asked to do something for God. If it was singing up in front in church or being a leader for something, even though it terrified me, I would trust that God would enable me and give me whatever I needed. And it was a few weeks after that that I felt very called to be a missionary. And so I went right out of high school to the mission field, and that's where me and Anders met. He was there from Walla Walla after a year of college. And since then, there's been a lot more yeses. And having 4 kids and homeschooling them, and we both really wanted to supply them with a lot of quality friends and a lot of quality experiences. And especially if you homeschool, you can get worn down just doing the basics, math, science, reading, that you can get overwhelmed and not have time for elaborate art projects or elaborate science experiments and stuff like that. So we started a co-op. This is our 7th year of that, and we have over 50 families, and we meet together every other Wednesday, and Anders takes off every Wednesday from his practice to come and help. And I really love that because I think it's important that we tag team. Like, we've been married 20 years, and honestly, we don't fight. We don't disagree like on anything mostly. And maybe our one difficult conversation early on in marriage was when I was working full time and we had a 1-year-old, and like I would come home from work and he would have cleaned the kitchen and look at what I did. Can I get a thank you? And I was just like, wow, thanks, babe. And I'd worked 60 hours that week or whatever, and I just had a talk with him. I was like, listen, this has got to be not even like 50-50. This has got to be 100% my house, 100% your house, 100% your kid, 100% my kid. We both have to give 100% together in our life. And so, of course, now he's working hard and is very busy and sees a ton of patients. And so he doesn't give 100%, but he does help with homeschool, and he takes off every Wednesday, and he really supports and is a team member on that front, and I appreciate that so much. So we have 50 families, about 300 kids we get together, and now my kids have such good lifelong friendships. All of the classes are parent-led. We have art classes and PE classes and science and sewing and baking, and the list goes on and on. We have a debate class this year for our high school students. Yes, and so this is my husband there with the skateboarding, handing out a Steps to Christ to someone as we're on our way to the skateboard park.
He got a book.
Yeah. And then we really wanted our kids to notice the community around them and to feel like there's something they can do. I'm a big believer in everyone can do something, even as a child. So we started getting involved with the homeless shelter downtown Chattanooga, which feeds 150 to 200 homeless souls 3 times a day, 7 days a week. So we go down there and we help serve meals, and we decorate homemade cupcakes for them and hand them out with smiles and help serve down there regularly, and started making...
Every first Sabbath.
Yes, every first Sabbath.
Yeah.
And we
Service
started
Sabbath.
having homeless bags in the car that we can hand out to anytime we see a homeless person. And I just want my kids to notice the people around them and know that there's something they can do, even if it's something, small, a smile or a hello. But if we have some way to help, that they can help. And I want them to, as they go into their adult life, our oldest is now in high school, that it can be a part of their life, a regular thing, a practice. This is some pictures from the co-op and some pictures from the homeless shelter as well.
Homeless shelter, co-op
Yeah,
there.
we're doing some art
Yeah,
classes.
doing some art, the kids.
And then I also lead a children's choir. So even though I'm an introvert, I have to get up in front and lead and push myself beyond maybe what I'm naturally comfortable with. I mean, a perfect day to me is like a rainy day at home reading a book with a cup of tea. Like, that sounds perfect. But I know my kids love their friends and their involvement, so we're out and about most every day doing stuff after we get our schooling done. And God has really carried carried the minimal effort of saying yes, and then he really supplies the power behind that yes if you're just willing to.
Yeah, if you're willing to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is just some fun pictures of Chas's art class. They're doing good. And then a friend of mine and I did a mountain bike maintenance and car maintenance class because we looked at each other and he said, we kind of wondered how many people know how to change the oil in their car these days. And so we did it in a couple different, we did it in a diesel, Volkswagen, and our Honda Odyssey. So we're trying to teach the children some practical things that they're going to need in life. I think that might be all the pictures, yeah. So I wanted to end with this. The cause of God in the earth today is in need of living representatives of Bible truth. God is calling not only upon ministers, but also physicians, nurses, call porters, Bible workers, and other consecrated laymen of varied talent who have a knowledge of the Word of God and who know the power of His grace to consider the needs of the unwarned cities. Time is rapidly passing. There's much to be done. Every agency must be set in operation that present opportunities that may be wisely improved. I think time is drawing nigh. Every day it seems like the world is getting more crazy. And we have a truth that I think is special. I think the older I get, I am so privileged to be a part of this denomination, of this community, of this group of believers. And if we don't tell people what we know, it's terrifying to me to know if I meet someone in heaven that, that I think dream everyone's had, why didn't you tell me if you knew? And it's not just for ministers. Oh yeah, one more little story, and then we'll be done. So recently, I've had a PA who's been my PA that's worked really closely with me for 10 years. I've been there right at 10 years, and she's great. She's so good with patients, really compassionate, caring, but has been through a lot of things in her life and gone through some things in her own denomination that have really kind of made her bitter. She's doesn't love the idea of going back to that church every week just because of a lot of things that have happened. She's lost her husband, and she has one son, and she does a really good job with him, but has often told me her frustrations with her own church. And I've been working with her for years, and I've told her about our books, and she sees them around, and just this last year, I gave her a Steps to Christ, and I didn't really think much of it, because she's worked with me a long time. I kind of thought we've kind of talked about a lot of this stuff, yeah.
I think that seeing your calm through the whole pandemic situation was a big testimony to her, and seeing that you didn't, panic or get upset, and when things have happened at work that you don't panic or get upset, and that you just have calm through these storms has been a big testament to her, in addition to the Steps to Christ.
Yeah, that's probably true, because I don't know if you work with anyone in your, where it's always the perfect time to panic about everything. I'm not usually that guy in my office. I'm usually like, okay, let's go see the next patient, and then we'll figure out if we need to panic. But anyways, I gave her a Steps to Christ, and then it was a few weeks later, she had read it. Read, not maybe the whole thing, but she said, man, that book is really good. That is really well written. I've just never kind of thought of things that way. And then really soon after that, this was right around the time our pastor was doing the podcast and everything, I said, well, did you listen to that podcast? Because our pastor's preaching about it this weekend, and my daughters are singing in choir at our church this weekend. And so she came to church with us that next weekend after she'd told me that. And we're working on her getting to come back, but She is really searching, just like a lot of people out there. And we have so much more to give than I think we give ourselves credit for, that we give these books credit for. They can just do amazing things. So why don't we have another word of prayer? Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for another day. Thank you that we could be here and learn ways to spread your gospel, to become more like you, so we can reach all those that need to hear your voice, that need to hear the truth, Lord. Please go with us as we leave here. Help us to be a blessing to others in all that we do. In your name, amen.